Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the October webinar of the P&G Alumni Network. This is your host and MC, Andrew Tarvin, coming to you from a Boston airport. So hopefully the audio is okay in the background. But I know Lisa and the team has great audio setup, so they're going to be set up for that. Great. I'm excited about the topic today because we're going to be talking about retirement, something that I think for many of us, we kind of keep putting off and like, oh, I'll think about that eventually. So I'm excited to hear actually a little bit more about that in depth, regardless of where you are kind of in your career and how close or far away you are from retirement. I think it's a very valuable thing for us to learn more. And we have a great partner with us today sharing more about that. Before we jump into the webinar itself, though, just in case you're joining us for the very first time, a couple things to know about the webinar technology that we are using, GoToWebinar. First of all, you'll notice on your screen you have a couple of things that you'll see, which I'll get into in just a second. But first, about the webinar is this is a roughly monthly series that we do with the goal of connecting members, providing insight with both from people within the P&G Alumni Network and some of our partners as well, and leveraging that expertise. Everyone talks about one of the big things that they miss the most out of after working at P&G is the people, and so we thought, why not connect those people? And that's the overall goal of the P&G Alumni Network as a whole. So in addition to these webinar series that we do, it is a group of 35,000 plus members all around the world with the goal of connecting, enriching our experiences, and also providing philanthropic opportunities, particularly those in empowering different groups with entrepreneurship skills, business skills, that kind of stuff. You can learn more about that on the pgalums.com website. For the GoToWebinar itself, you'll notice two screens showing up on your particular screen there. The first is the webinar screen. You'll see slides there. What you won't see is any video. That's just so that we avoid any kind of additional delays and lag between video speaking and the audio that comes through. So you'll just see the slides as we kind of progress through those. And then you also see a webinar kind of panel off to your right. In that panel itself, you will notice that you have all been muted, just so that we can hopefully avoid any too loud of background noise. But that being said, there is an opportunity to still ask questions. So certainly as Lisa is sharing the presentation, if you have questions that come up, share those in the box itself, and then towards the end we'll have an opportunity to kind of facilitate some of those questions so that we can get some of the expertise on the line. So certainly feel free to share those. For today, we are going to be talking about work the plan. Don't let the plan work you. And our presenter is Lisa Colletti from Aspiriant. And so if you're not familiar with Aspiriant, they are a proud sponsor of the P&G Alumni Network. They've been partners with us since last spring, and they're excited to bring their second webinar to the network this year. So they've already provided one tremendous value, and we thought, hey, this is fantastic. Let's come back and do it again. Aspiriant is one of the largest independent wealth management firms in the U.S. and works with top executives, business owners, and entrepreneurs in all aspects of wealth management, whether that's investments, financial planning, taxes, estate planning, and philanthropic giving. That's one of the things that they talk with us about. You can go back and watch the replay of that webinar if that's something that is of interest to you. They manage over $12 billion for 1,600 plus families across the nation and are regularly recognized as being an industry leader. Our presenter today, Lisa, you can see her picture right there, is the managing director in planning and strategy and is a partner in the Aspiriant New York office. She has developed her expertise in comprehensive wealth management by serving the varied needs of affluent families since 1999. Prior to joining Aspiriant, Lisa worked in the private client advisor practice at Deloitte and as a director. She began her career in wealth management at Deloitte in 1999 after working for 4 years in the firm's employee benefits, tax, and consulting practices. She is a member of the New York Bar Association and Financial Planning Association and earned her certified financial planner credential in 2001. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Andrew, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today for Work the Plan. Don't let the plan work you. I'm excited to have an opportunity to speak to you all today about this important topic. My prepared remarks will run about 40 minutes or so, and then, as Andrew mentioned, we'll open it up at the end for questions. And I encourage everyone to stay on the line through the end of the Q&A for an exclusive offer from our firm, Aspiriant, to the P&G Alumni Network members. Before we actually jump into the content and our discussion, I'd like to introduce fellow P&G Alumni Network member James Moorhead. James will share some thoughts on his retirement planning and how his thinking has evolved on this topic over his career. Just a little bit of background on James. He was named Grand Marketer of the Year in 2010 by Adweek for his work on Old Spice while at P&G. He went on to become the CMO at Dish Network before leaving to join Metromile, a pay-per-mile car insurance company designed for low-mileage drivers. Today, he's now COO of Metromile. He's also a board member at KeyMe, a technology company that provides an app for copying keys and robotic kiosks for new key fabrication. Most recently, James was honored by the P&G Alumni Network as 40 Under 40 winner during last year's global conference in Cincinnati. As you can tell, he's gone from working at a mega company to a large company to a startup in just a span of 8 years. And as a result, he has some unique insights into how various career transition over time can impact your retirement planning. So James, welcome to our session today, and I'll let you take it from here to just provide a couple of high-level thoughts to the group.
Well, thanks, Lisa. I appreciate you guys welcoming me on the call this morning. As you mentioned, I have moved to a number of different companies over the past few years, from Procter & Gamble, so Fortune 50, to Dish Network, Fortune 200, and then onward to a startup that was about $1.5 million when I joined it a few years ago, and that has created a lot of change in my life as well as how I think about retirement. And also, I've welcomed 3 young daughters into my family over the past several years that have certainly made me think differently about it. So, a couple of comments that will link to today's presentation from you, Lisa. I think early on I recognized I was going to create my wealth by running businesses and working, and not by managing my own money. And so I turned over my financial planning and money management to a third party. I learned a lot with that first group, and then ultimately I turned over that to Aspiriant about 5 years ago, and have been really happy with the work I've been doing with them. And having an advisor has really just helped me better understand my risk profile and how that has changed over the years, and how I should think differently about my asset allocation. And there's certainly a lot to consider, thinking about funding education for my children, moving into organizations where I'm heavily compensated with stock options, and what are the tax implications that are associated with that. Thinking about insurance holistically and life insurance and providing for my family, different estate laws. I've moved from Cincinnati to Massachusetts to Colorado to now California, and each of them having very just different estate planning needs. I think some of that background has really forced me to think deeply and work with my partner at Aspiriant to consider sort of how my risk profile has changed over the past several years. And P&G being a very stable company, and having some stock option compensation there, moving to Dish Network where I was very heavily compensated in options, and then now working for a startup where I have a very low salary and lots of options, makes me think very differently. And then providing for a family of 5 living in the Bay Area has its own stress points. So, we've been talking consistently about how I think about, what I did early on, from funding 401k strategies to beginning to fund education for my children even before I had kids, and then thinking about estate planning holistically and when do I want to retire, which is very early. And each of these things all linked, very heavily to the work I do to understand my asset allocation with my partners at Aspiriant. So I hope everyone, I hope you enjoy the discussion today. I'll stay afterwards for Q&A, and happy to provide any perspective I can on the work that Aspiriant has done for me, but as well as how sort of my risk profile has evolved over time and has changed my asset allocation pretty significantly, moving from P&G to a startup over time. So thanks so much, Lisa.
Well, thank you, James, for that insight and those introductory remarks. I think one of the things that you've highlighted for the attendees here today is that there are so many different facets to getting a comprehensive plan in place, and our goal today is really to highlight and mention a bunch of different things that you should be thinking about. I think any of the topics that we'll be going through, we could likely do a full hour presentation on each of them. So the purpose here is simply to make you aware of all of the different things that you should be thinking about, so then you can determine next steps for moving forward and getting your plan in place. So to kick off the content here, just, a little cartoon. We've got a depiction here of an older couple reviewing their finances and coming to the conclusion that the only way their financial plan is feasible is to either work longer or die early. And at first glance, the cartoon probably makes you chuckle a little bit. But that said, if you can relate to it and it has you a bit worried, statistics show that you're not alone. In fact, Transamerica found that 57% of Gen Xers and 55% of baby boomers feel that they'll outlive their savings and investments. And about 47% of millennials worry that they won't be able to meet the basic financial planning needs of their family after retiring. So the bottom line here is, irrespective of what demographic you happen to fall into, it appears that there is a high degree of concern across the board regarding retirement readiness. But not to worry, as I mentioned, we're here today to help you get on the right path to establishing a long-term healthy financial plan. And it's important to keep in mind that getting on the right path and staying on it doesn't happen overnight. It's going to require focus and discipline over many years. Listening to this presentation, I think, is a wonderful start, but it is really the steps that you'll take once the session has ended that have the power to really impact your financial future. So my challenge to each of you today is to take out your pens and be ready to jot down 2 to 4 key takeaways that are relevant for your situation, and make a promise to yourself and your families that you'll take action on those items by the end of 2018. So we're going to be discussing planning strategies for every stage of your career. And the key point here is, it's never too early, and nor is it ever too late to get started. To be clear, starting early is obviously ideal, but even if you're further into your career, there are many positive steps that you can take to improve your retirement situation, even if you happen to be concerned about it today. Also, keep in mind that while we're going to bring you through different strategies to think about during each stage of your career, planning is certainly a fluid exercise and unique to every individual. So you may find some of the ideas I mentioned resonating with you, even if it happens to be associated with a different life stage than you're currently in. So now I'm going to turn it back to Andrew to give us, go through a quick polling question to get a sense of what is keeping people up at night.
Yep, absolutely. So what you should now see, I'm launching right now, you should see for the attendees of the webinar, you should see a quick poll with the option to vote. The question is, currently my biggest concern from a financial perspective about retirement is, how will I pay off student loans and save for retirement? Am I saving and investing appropriately to meet my goals? Will Social Security be there for me when I retire? will medical expenses in retirement destroy my nest egg? Or how do I smartly transfer my assets to my children? So you can go ahead and click on the various options there. It gives you a dot to do that. We'll allow a few more seconds for people to continue to vote. Again, you can just kind of click that on your screen, and then we'll share the results and share some of that information back. All right, so we're collecting responses now. Most have voted. All right, we'll go ahead and close the polls now so that we can share these results. And the results are, so the highest, kind of the biggest concern for people at 60% is, am I saving and investing appropriately to meet my goal? So that's at 60%, followed by at 20%, will medical expenses in retirement destroy my next egg? And then the remaining three options, will Social Security be there for me when I retire? How do I smartly transfer assets to my children? And how will I pay off student loans and save for retirement? All fall in about 7%, 6 to 7% there. So share that back back to Lisa.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. So when we think about, working through the planning process and thinking about retirement, it's really a matter of thinking not only about retirement, but how you'll actually fund your lifetime goals. So the first part of the process is to actually quantify the goal. It's not enough to say, I want to retire while I'm still healthy and live the good life. In order to really begin planning, you need to be much more specific and say something along the lines, or map out something along the lines of, before retirement, I want to spend $100,000 a year. I want to pay for my two children to go to college at around $50,000 a year. I think I want to retire at 64. I'll probably downsize my current home that is worth around $750,000 and maybe purchase a condo nearby, close to family, for about $300,000. I then think I want to use those remaining proceeds to purchase another condo on a golf course in a warm weather state, and I want to have enough in retirement to spend $120,000 a year, and then spend maybe $20,000 every other year on a big family vacation. So, hopefully I got my point across there with the example, and that is, if you want to start planning, you need to know what you're actually planning for. I understand that, speaking about the future is, with this level of specificity, is close to impossible. But that said, it is important to understand what you want, at least directionally, so that you can begin planning for it. The second step is to determine, where actually is the money going to come from? Meaning, what do you have now? What will you earn today and in the future? And what income streams do you project to have in retirement? The third step is to run a financial projection to see how it all hangs together when you compare what you'd like to have to what you currently have, to your resources, and then, adding in various estimates around rates of return on your investments, inflation, life expectancy, etc. Now, depending on your comfort level with running projections, this may be something you do on your own, or you can certainly consider hiring an advisor, as James has done, to assist you with that process. Now, once you have the projection and you see whether or not, things are hanging together and you're on track to meet your long-term goals, to the extent you are not, the fourth step is to create a saving strategy to make up for any shortfall that you're seeing. And that could mean, saving in tax-deferred accounts, cutting back on expenses, making a plan for potentially working longer, and the list goes on. And then finally, the fifth step, I think, falls squarely in where the majority of the audience is concerned, and that is creating an investment strategy that makes sense for your situation and to monitor those results on an ongoing basis. Again, I can't make this point strongly enough. A successful financial plan is not a set it and forget it kind of proposition. Similar to how we all have to take care of our physical health on a regular basis with well visits, healthy eating, exercise, good sleep, the health of our financial plan is going to require ongoing focus on spending patterns, your investment strategy as markets evolve, insurance selection as our lives evolve, and the list goes on. But again, I encourage you to get started and stick with it. We're going to start here with, some comments about early career and the benefits of starting now versus waiting. So for all of you out there in your 20s and 30s who are thinking you have decades ahead of you to think about saving for the future, I want you to consider this following example. Here we have person one who waits 10 years and then starts saving $6,000 a year for 10 years. Versus person two who starts saving now, a lower amount at $3,000 a year, but they do so for 20 years. So at the end of the day, they each save the same amount over 20 years. Who wins? I think you probably know the answer. At 7% portfolio growth each year, person number one ends up with an $89,000 nest egg, while person number two, who saved half the amount over a longer period of time, ends up with $132,000, $43,000 more in savings, or close to 50% more than person one, who actually needs to save $8,900 to catch up to person number two over those 10 years. Now, you may be thinking, well, that's fine. I'll wait 10 years, and rather than doing the 6,000, I'll just catch up with the 8,900. Now, this is where things get a little tricky. As is often the case, person number two is now a bit older. Their life has evolved. They might have a mortgage, maybe a couple of kids, and a whole host of other financial responsibilities, so that earmarking additional funds for savings is really not an easy thing to do. Perhaps it's quite impossible, so they just keep putting it off. So anyway, I just want to stress, start now versus waiting. There are a lot of great quotes out there, and if you don't want to listen to me, I think one that is attributable to Warren Buffett is one of my favorites and really applicable here, and that is, do not save what is left after spending, but spend what is left after saving. Bottom line, pay yourself first and then spend the rest. So that leads us to our next slide, and that is taking control of your saving and spending. It's never too early, and this is relevant at any age and stage of your financial life. The first point here is that we really want to encourage you to pay close attention to any outstanding debt that you have. You need to ask yourself, what interest rate are you paying? If you have credit card debt with high interest rates, you really need to focus on getting rid of that and then turn your attention to saving in earnest. The second point here is to pay close attention to retirement savings opportunities that are available to you through your company's 401k plans. While you might like getting the largest paycheck possible and not directing anything to your 401k, directing even a very small percentage to your savings over time can have a major impact on your retirement situation going forward. It's also really important to keep in mind that employers typically match employee contributions up to a certain amount. So let's say you're earning $100,000 and your employer matches 50% of the first 6% that you contribute. If you contribute $6,000 or 6% of the $100,000, they will then give you a $3,000 match, $3,000 of free money. This is a no-brainer and something that you absolutely must make sure you're taking advantage of if you're not already doing so. The third point here is to create a long-term diversified investment strategy and to stick with it. Do not make buy and sell decisions based on what you're reading in the financial headlines or seeing on the news. And here's another great quote from Buffett. Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful. Said differently, and as shown in this illustration, buying at the top because everyone around you is doing so, and then panicking and selling at the bottom because you're letting your emotions get the best of you, may just be a recipe for a very bad investment outcome, and it's something that we need to make sure we stay away from. We need to have a well thought out investment strategy and stick to it long term, because market timing is an impossible game to play. Even the experts cannot do this. So we want to take a long-term approach to investing and simply monitor over time. Some other early career considerations around insurance. In addition to creating savings and investment strategies, we also encourage you to make sure that you're focused on risk management. Many of us, I think, especially in our early years, like to think that we're invincible and that life's misfortunes will not come our way. And while I hope that's the case for all of you, the truth of the matter is the only way to have a solid financial plan is to make sure you have a safety net in place for you and your family in the form of insurance should you die prematurely, become disabled, or get into an accident. Now, when thinking about life insurance and how much you should purchase, I encourage you again to run some financial projections, eliminating the income that you're projected to earn over your lifetime, and then determine what amount is necessary for your family to still achieve the goals and objectives that you have for them. Keep in mind here, there are many different types of insurance available in the market. But generally speaking, a simple term policy is likely sufficient to cover lost income from a premature death. Now, when thinking about property and casualty insurance for your home and cars, we encourage you to shop around and explore different alternatives like Metromile. Make sure that your insurance program is appropriate for your life as it is today, rather than as it was when you actually purchased the insurance several years back. So again, this is not a set it and forget it type of proposition. We encourage you to take advantage of higher deductibles as appropriate to reduce your premium payments, and also consider bundling your insurance with one provider so that you can take advantage of credits and avoid any gaps in coverage. So now we're going to turn our attention and shift a little bit to mid and late career concerns around accumulating wealth and planning for the future. By the time you've reached this stage in your life and career, things have likely taken shape for you. In most cases, you've figured out what you want to be when you grow up, where you're going to live, how your family has or will take shape, and you've reached a lot of milestones. But as shown in this illustration, there are still a lot of choices ahead, and you're not really sure where you will go from here. You've got a big empty map representing questions like when will I retire? Where will I retire? Do I want a house on the beach? Do I want to travel, play golf, help my kids, have a second act career? The possibilities really are endless. So I'm going to turn it back to Andrew for another polling question to get a sense of how you're all feeling about retirement.
All right, excellent. So next polling question is now up, so you can vote there. You can select the various options there. And so the question is, when you think about how prepared you are for retirement, you feel woefully unprepared. I've done nothing and wish I had started sooner. At a standstill, I've started saving but don't have a plan. I'm somewhat prepared. I have a plan and I'm putting pieces down, and I feel very prepared. I have a plan and am working it. So again, you have a few more seconds to kind of fill in your vote there on how prepared you feel for retirement going forward. Give a few more seconds and then close out. All right, we'll close the poll here so that we can share the results. So on the question of when you think about how prepared you are for retirement, you feel 35% say somewhat prepared. They have a plan and are starting to put the pieces in place. 32% say feel very prepared. They have a plan and are starting to work on it. And 28% say they're at a standstill. They've started saving but don't have a full plan. Only 6% say that they are completely unprepared. So that's good news for the people joining, but also means that maybe there's an audience of people that didn't even realize that they should join there. So the kind of a split third between standstill, somewhat prepared, and very prepared. Lisa, we'll turn it back to you.
Okay, well, I think those are promising results for this group for sure. And, I hope that after this presentation, if we were to go back several months ahead and do this poll again, we'd have more people falling into the I feel very prepared category. So why don't we now move on and talk a little bit more about smart ways to manage your growing wealth when you're at the stage in your life and career. So the first point here about maximizing all available account types, I want to reiterate what I said before about the power associated with maximizing contributions to a 401k plan. At this point in your career, you should not only think about putting in enough to get the employer match, but perhaps consider maxing out up to the IRS limits of $18,500. And if you're 50 or older, you can actually put in another $6,000 of catch-up contributions. So again, if you're at this stage in your career, I really encourage you to put as much into your 401k as the tax law allows. Also, if you have children and you are eager to save for college, 529 plans provide a tax-advantaged way to do so. You will rarely hear me use the term no-brainer when it comes to any type of financial planning strategy, because every person and situation is a little bit different. But I feel strongly that to the extent you have young children and saving for college is an important part of what you'd like to do for them, 529 plans are certainly one of those no-brainer types of opportunities, because you are able to contribute funds to the plans. They grow in a tax-deferred manner, and then when you pull them out to pay for higher education expenses, the distributions are tax-free. So a very powerful vehicle. There's a new provision of that law that allows you to take out up to $10,000 for K through 12 expenses. You need to be careful of taking advantage of that depending on the state in which you live. There's some work to do around figuring out whether or not that's right for you. But again, I certainly encourage you to take a close look at these plans if you haven't already done so and you have children you'd like to save for. Also, there's a note up here about rolling over your old 401k plans to an IRA. There's certainly a benefit associated with rolling over plans to an IRA and consolidating your accounts and getting organized. It's much easier to manage your wealth when you're managing a few accounts rather than managing many. Having an important thing to keep in mind is having a lot of accounts does not necessarily mean you're diversified. Having varying investments within the accounts is what leads to diversification. So if you've worked for several companies and have outstanding 401k plans with those companies, I encourage you to think about consolidating and organizing into one IRA. Also, the point on stock options, which James referred to before. If you happen to have stock options through your employer, We encourage you to take a very close look at the exercise possibilities and the consequences of exercising from both a tax and investment standpoint so that you can get a sense of how the performance of the underlying stock impacts your long-term plan, because having a good understanding of this will inform your decision around exercise. Another point here about insurance. At this point in your life, you probably want to ensure that you also have an umbrella policy that sits on top of your homeowner's policy. Um, that will kick in if there's a judgment against you for a higher amount than your underlying coverage. A good rule of thumb here is to purchase a policy that is at least 1 time your net worth, though it could certainly differ if your net worth is very high. Coverage for umbrella insurance is fairly inexpensive, so it certainly makes sense to have it. And finally, the final point here is to really hone in and pay attention to all of the different facets of your planning. At this point in your career, perhaps you don't have as much time on your side, so you really want to maximize the strategies that you have available to you and make the most of them. At this stage of your life, another key concern is likely protecting your family. If you've made the decision that you do, in fact, need life insurance, you'll need to decide whether you want a term policy where you're only paying for insurance for a period of time, let's say 10 or 20 years, or a permanent policy, in which case you're purchasing insurance as well as underlying investments that may build up over time. Generally speaking, my position here is that if you're a disciplined saver and investor, a term policy is likely the right option for you, though there may be situations where a permanent policy makes sense. The other point here is you want to ensure that you have all documents in place to give others the ability to act on your behalf should you become incapacitated and not have the ability to do so. These powers of attorney are generally executed in connection with an estate plan. Oftentimes I'll hear folks, say, well, I don't really have that much. I heard that the exemptions are very high, that I can die with 11 million in assets and not be subject to estate tax. So I really don't need any type of estate plan. It's really important that you do have one, because if you don't have a plan in place for how you'd like your assets distributed, then the state intestate rules will kick in, and the assets will be distributed according to those rules. It's also really important to name guardians if you have minor children. So even if you don't have many financial assets to think of, you of course want to think about who is going to be taking care of your children should you not be here to do so. And finally, we want you to take and pay very close attention to beneficiary designations. These are as important as estate planning documents. Irrespective of what your estate planning documents say, the beneficiary designations in your retirement plans and life insurance contracts will trump. So whenever you have a life event, marriage, divorce, potentially death of a spouse, you want to make sure that you are reviewing your beneficiary designations and making sure that they're in line with your wishes. We also encourage you to be smart about taxes. Taxes that are generated by your investment income are an expense that will chop away at your portfolio over time. And because of this, we really want to ensure that you're taking steps to minimize these taxes. In this diagram here, the yellow line on the top is showing the rate of return we'd achieve before tax, and the lowest in orange is an example of the returns a portfolio actually enjoys after taxes are paid. What we're hoping you can achieve is this blue line in the middle. It's unlikely that you can avoid taxes altogether, but you can invest in a tax-aware manner so that tax impact is minimized. And in order to demonstrate this point, I'm going to give a very, very basic example. Let's assume that your portfolio consists of 50% stock or equities and 50% fixed income. The equity investments are going to yield dividend and capital gain income, which is taxed at lower rates than interest income from fixed income or bonds. And being a tax-aware investor means that you would intentionally hold your equity holdings in a taxable account, and the fixed income component of your allocation would be placed in a retirement account, which is, of course, tax deferred, so that you could minimize the taxes paid on the earnings each year. We are now going to shift our attention into the retirement years, but before we jump into that, I'm going to turn it back to Andrew for another polling question.
Excellent. This will be our last polling question, which is now launched on your screen. The question is, my definition of retirement is, see you later, I'm out of here. Or I want to work part-time using my expertise to teach or consult with other people. Or I want to spend some time doing some volunteer work while also still kind of enjoying my retirement. And the last option is retirement. What's retirement? I love my career. So no retirement whatsoever. So again, you're just giving, we're giving some opportunity to go ahead and answer those, one of those 4 selections for my definition of retirement. I'll give a few more seconds for people to go ahead and vote in our last poll of the day. All right, we're reaching a few more seconds. Get those votes in. We'll go ahead and close out here and share the results. So the results for my definition of retirement is the highest is 42%, saying I want to work part-time using my expertise to teach and consult, so leveraging that expertise long-term. Followed very closely by spending some time doing some volunteer work. So many people who want to not just sit on the beach, but do a little bit of work as well at 38%. See you later, I'm out of there is at 12%, and 8% are saying what's retirement. So kind of majority within the space of teaching or consulting or giving back through some volunteer work. So Lisa, we'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, great. I am not at all surprised by those results. The retirement of today is definitely not like the retirement in yesteryears. We are all now living longer and much fuller lives in retirement. And, I think the key point to make here is that effective planning for retirement includes much more than simply planning for the financial aspect of your retirement. It also includes thinking about how you want to spend your time. And just to compare our results here on the line, there was a Transamerica study that showed about 3 in 10 workers say they hope to engage in some sort of paid work as part of their retirement dream. About 13% want an encore career, another 13% want to start a business, and 11% want to continue to work in the same career. So again, much different than years past. And the bottom line here is that it doesn't need to be one way or the other. Retirement years can be a blend of work and play if that's what is going to make sense for you. So as you're working through that, I think, one of the key things to think about is when will you actually need your money? In addition to thinking about how you'll be spending time, you need to think strategically about how you're going to be drawing down on your savings. When we run financial plans for the clients we work with, we're generally using a life expectancy of age 95. So, that typically means 30 plus years in retirement, which is, a very long time in retirement. And we're also asking questions, around spending patterns. We would expect that the early years of retirement are going to be higher spending years, because, you're healthy and traveling and doing, perhaps a lot of the bucket list things that you had put on hold during your working life. So, all things to keep in mind as you're building out those projections. It's really important here to think about managing portfolio risk when you turn off the income spigot and you no longer have assets to add to your portfolio. That said, a shift into retirement does not necessarily suggest an automatic shift into a very conservative portfolio. After all, 30 years or more than that is a very long time horizon, and as such, a full shift to a conservative portfolio might not really make sense. We also want you to be mindful of how powerful your tax deferred accounts are. When we're saving in 401ks and IRAs, the government is letting you save in this tax deferred vehicle so that you can build up your retirement nest egg. But they do get to a point where they say, well, I want to get taxes here, and you need to start taking required minimum distributions at 70 and a half. The key point here is to preserve those assets as long as possible, and if you have other resources to draw upon in the form of taxable accounts, you certainly should. Finally, we want you to think about evaluating your Social Security options. You can take Social Security as early as 62 with a reduced benefit at your full retirement age, or at age 70 with some increased benefits. That said, what makes the most sense for you will depend on your working history, your marital status, your spouse's working history, your health, access to other financial assets, and the list goes on. So pay a close attention to this decision and consult a professional if you need help. And finally here, don't forget to have fun. Here on the line today, we had, a high percentage of folks saying they feel very prepared, and that's wonderful. One of the things I enjoy most about my job is working with folks like you and running various scenarios to demonstrate that they have the wherewithal about them within the plan to splurge on a big vacation or purchase that dream home on the beach. And if you've worked your whole life and done smart things along the way, you want to keep in mind that the planning process is not just about accumulating the largest balance sheet possible, but rather tapping into your resources to live the life that you've dreamed. The other thing that, a lot of folks are likely thinking about in retirement is wealth transfer. If you have children or grandchildren, perhaps taking advantage of annual exclusion gifts. You could give each individual $15,000 per year without having any gift tax consequences. You can also consider paying tuition directly. You can contribute to a 529 plan on behalf of grandchildren. There's a comment here, the 5-in-1 option. That simply means that the government gives you the ability to front load your annual exclusion gifts. So that $15,000 I mentioned times 5 is $75,000. If you're a married couple, then you multiply that by 2. You have the ability to put $150,000 into a 529 plan for a grandchild in 1 year, and then you would simply forego annual exclusion gifts to them in the following 4 years. You might also be charitably inclined. To the extent you are, I encourage you to give low basis stock and avoid the capital gains tax rather than cash. You might consider opening up a donor advised fund. And I also, want to point out that there is also the P&G Alumni Foundation that you can consider gifting to the extent you're charitably inclined and want to minimize your taxes in a particular year because you'd get the tax deduction. Also think about estate planning. I made a comment before alluding to the $11.2 million exemption for each individual. This is scheduled to drop down to $6.5 million in 2026. At this level, most folks do not feel as though they'll have a taxable estate. However, it's important to keep your eye on this number as time goes on and your estate appreciates, because tax law may change, and depending on the state in which you live, you might have a estate tax to think about. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up and open it up to the audience for questions.
All right. Excuse me. Excellent. So as Lisa mentioned, we'll now take questions. So feel free to, in your panel itself, feel free to ask some questions. We've already had some questions that have come in while you were chatting. So a few questions coming in. So the first one that we received a little while back was, how do you reconcile advice from different advisors? So one person kind of shared that from 3 advisors, they said, yeah, you can retire. 3 advisors said that you cannot. They're all given the same information, assuming the same inflation and growth rates and that kind of stuff. How do you kind of make a decision around those types of, where different advisors are giving you different information?
Yeah, I think you need to look at the credentials of the advisor that you're working with, their years of experience and the types of clients that they're working with. Assuming that all of the folks you've been speaking with are professional, well-educated, and experts in their field, then I think you need to spend some time actually digging into the projections that they are preparing for you, and ask some questions around the different variables in how they're running their numbers. There's a lot of different ways to run a projection. There's not one perfect way to go about it, but the results can be, they can reflect different outcomes. So I think you just need to really dig into some of those details if you have 2 plans that are side by side that happen to conflict with one another.
Okay, great. This question is for James. If you're still on the line, you still there?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. So for James, question is, what are some of the best things you've done regarding your financial and retirement planning, either based on some work that you've done with Aspiriant or otherwise?
Yeah, great question. I think probably the single most important thing, and it was covered well in the webinar, was starting early. I started saving for kids 5 years before I had kids in 529, which then was rolled into each of my 3 daughters over time. So and starting early on end of it, I think, is hugely beneficial. I think secondly, thinking about it holistically early on and turning over that to a professional versus me trying to stress about it and think that I could manage it myself. I have had multiple rollover 401ks from different businesses now, and it's just a lot to manage personally. So having Aspiriant do that's been really helpful. And then I think the holistic piece of it is, I have 3 kids. I have a spouse who's been at home more recently with the kids, and thinking about everything from life insurance to when we're going to retire, and what are the different things between planning for 3 daughters' weddings and college and other things. So I think having a holistic view and then evolving that over time, because it certainly has changed over the past 5 years pretty dramatically based on what job I had and sort of what my income was and sort of the risk associated with it. So hopefully that's helpful, and happy to follow up. Aspiriant has been a great partner in helping me think through everything from sort of the legal side of it to the insurance side, and then also how do I estimate or gauge my risk level in the marketplace.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So this one is for Lisa. There's a question around if you're already mid-career and haven't really done a whole lot of this, is it too late? What do you recommend for people who are a little bit behind, like, they're not in that early stage and haven't done much? What's kind of the first next step they should take? Are you still there, Lisa?
Oh, Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I was coughing before I put you on mute and forgot to unmute you. I think, the most important thing you could do is just, remember what I said at the beginning of the presentation. It's never too late to get started. Don't feel like because you haven't done much that you're paralyzed by that, because if you start now and get control over it and take significant steps to really focus on your spending and your saving and what you want in the future, you'll be in a much better place than kicking the can down the road. Again, don't feel paralyzed by not having a major plan in place at this point in your life, and just take steps now to do what you can with the years you have left in your working life.
Yeah, that's great. As you're thinking about kind of portfolio options in actual retirement, do you have kind of a rough idea in terms of what percentage should be in, say, capital, like houses and mortgages, versus stock options versus dividends versus cash? Anything high level around what that looks like once you're actually in retirement?
Yeah, we get this question a lot, and unfortunately, I really can't give an answer because there really isn't a rule of thumb around this. I think the answer is as varied as the client situations that we see. I really think that it behooves folks to focus in on their own situation and their plan for retirement. We had a large percentage of folks saying that they wanted to work part-time. That's going to impact your asset allocation in retirement. The level of assets that you save could potentially impact the asset allocation in retirement. Your health could impact the allocation. So there's so many different variables. I would, it would not be professional of me to throw out any sort of rule of thumb, thinking that it applies to all.
Okay. Yeah. And with that kind of said, for the sake of time, we'll stop there. There are a few more questions that are more specific to different situations. And so, Lisa, if people have these questions and they want to learn a little bit more about Aspiriant, where can they go, and what kind of final words would you like to share with everyone?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that we tossed a lot out at you today, and I suspect that it's perhaps a bit overwhelming, and some of you might be feeling as though you could use the help of a professional. I'm delighted to let you know that we've already mentioned that our company helps clients with their financial strategies every day. James has already described some of the work that we've done together with him. And as a benefit to being a member of the P&G Alumni Network, Aspiriant is offering free of charge a 1-hour phone consultation to address your most pressing financial questions. And we are happy to offer this to the first 5 qualified network members that contact us. Once you do, we'll have an initial fact-finding call. We'll do the necessary research around your situation and then schedule a follow-up call to discuss your options based on our best thinking. To take advantage of the opportunity, please contact us at the email address listed here. And if you don't jot it down during this call, just keep an eye out for an email that will be following this presentation, which will include the offer.
Yep, exactly. So 2 hours after this event is over, once the webinar recording is completed, those of you who attended today will receive an email with the webinar recording as well as these links here, so that you can kind of share that, or you can kind of jot them down. I think Lisa, kind of to Lisa's point, even at the very beginning, is that here is some additional information. Start thinking about it now. Obviously, I think Aspiriant provided tremendous value, and so they may be a great partner to work with. But whether it's Aspiriant, someone else that you know, or kind of on your own, it seems certainly pertinent for all of us to be at least aware of it for the the percentage of us that kind of, aren't in the plan stage or still want to refine that plan, or maybe we feel like we're pretty comfortable, but maybe we might live a little bit longer than we think and we want to learn a little bit more. We can use this as a great prompt to do a little bit more. And to Lisa's point, what are action items that we're willing to do by the end of 2018 for ourselves and for our family in terms of financial planning. So with that being said, I'll say thank you to Lisa and to James for joining us to give us kind of a voice to an alumni member who kind of has that experience. So thank you both for joining us there. Just kind of wrap up very quickly some last couple of announcements for the Alumni Network. If you would like to get involved, you can do more, learn more at pgalums.com. You can go there to support the foundation, learn how you can partner with us. If you want to learn more about local chapters, how you can start one or join one, see what's going on in your kind of area, or to learn more about the 2019 conference, which will be taking place in Madrid, you can certainly email us at hello@pgalums.com. I've been Andrew Tarvin. Thank you all so much for joining, and we'll see you next time.